Spin, spin. And it says that we are live now. So I will say, hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world today. Um, I am Michael, the optimist. And you will notice that beside me is not Curtis York. Not Curtis York at all. What is going on here?
I'm optimistic too.
Curtis is every. We're all optimists here. So let me introduce to you and some of you guys who have met on my other channel at MNTV will know this face. If you have followed us anywhere else, if you follow Curtis, if you follow us, you know this face actually. You know she is on YouTube as Alicia Nicole. We know her as Alicia Pulliam. She is an actress, MC, all around amazing and great person. And she is going to be my host today. I'm going to be just the answerer. She is going to be the host. So I'm going to cede the seat and cede control of the show over to Alicia and let her go at it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Mike. I'm assuming your audience will call them the optimists. So hello, optimists. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Mike, for giving me the opportunity to be here. Um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, so for today's topic, I'm really excited because we're talking about co-parenting communication.
Hmm.
And it's so fitting that it's a part of this series, the Dad Survival Guide, because as we know, without good, as best as we can have it, right? Good co-parenting, good communication, everything could fall apart, right?
Hmm.
For you as parents as well as the kids, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. And I mean, I come from for those who have watched the series up until now, this is number 6, I guess we're doing. So we're getting up there. Been doing this for half a year, I guess, once a month. But for those who know, that, I have come out of, and I guess not even out completely, of a situation where, the communication and the back and forth, they're not even completely done. Like I have a book that's on the go. It's just about done. And one of the reasons it's not done is because, well, I'm not done. But communication is one of those things that has been a battle, so I'm really keen to talk about it.
Great. And my apologies if you can hear a dog barking in the background. So, one of my many hats, I am also a pet sitter.
Very cool, very
There
cool.
is one in the background. So, let's just kind of start from maybe the basics.
Mhm.
And maybe I'd like to just ask this question if you don't mind sharing. So, how long have you been navigating the world of co parenting?
So the brief recap is my ex left in 2018, February 1st, 2018. Not that I remember that day at all, but that's the time. And we've been in a very high conflict separation since then, involving our 3 kids. So, and of course, if you watch MNTV, then you know the 3 kids that I'm talking about. But
Mhm.
here, I usually try to keep their names out of it, just because of the nature of what we're talking about. But yeah, so we've been kind of going at it back and forth. There have been times in this whole battle where I have been accused of certain things that have made it so that I wasn't able to see the children at all for extended periods of time. It's been a big battle. Not gonna lie, not gonna sugarcoat it. Not gonna put rainbows and unicorns where there is only orcs and dragons, right? It has been a thing. So, in communication and, in many cases, the lack of being able to communicate properly, through this has definitely had its, what's the word I'm trying to choose? It has had its detriment to, how the past, I guess, 6 years, just about 7 years have gone.
Yes. So if we think back at the start of it, maybe not at the very start, because I'm sure things were still pretty hectic in the very beginning, but at some point along the way, you were able to establish open lines of communication. And as we know, there's some parents out there that haven't gotten to that point, right? They haven't
Hmm.
figured out how can we communicate, how can we talk to each other. So If we
Mhm.
think back to once the lines became open, what were some strategies that you used or some suggestions that you have to help those parents out there that don't have a line at all?
Sure. So, and I will say open-ish.
Open-ish. Okay.
Right. Every day is unfortunately a struggle, and I do try my best. Unfortunately, I live in a world where, I mean, and this is the thing with communication. It takes two people to communicate,
That's it.
right? So if one person is trying to communicate and one person is not, then almost no matter what you do, right, you're gonna end up with roadblocks. But there are some things that you can kind of put into place, especially if the communication is difficult. So I'm in a zone where my communication is very, very difficult. So what I have to do is I have to be very, number one, I have to be very purposeful about my communication. Number one, I have to be very purposeful about what I'm communicating about. And it's not just everything and anything,
Right.
right? So, kind of the old adage of you got to pick your battles, right?
Mhm.
I know that as soon as I put my fingers to an email or whatever not, quite likely one of two things are going to happen. Either it's going to be a battle or I'm going to be ignored. One of those two is probably going to happen.
Okay.
So, in order to kind of minimize that, because there is no battle that helps me, there's no battle that helps our kids, right?
Right.
It doesn't. It never is going to. So, the best way to deal with those things is to avoid them.
Mm,
So the first thing I do is I kind of pick my battles. Okay, what do I have to communicate about, and what am I going to choose to not communicate about? Right? What
mhm.
am I just going to say? Do you know what? This is not worth the email. This isn't worth the, let's call it, aggravation. This is not worth the potential battle. Right? So things that deal specifically with the children's health, school, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Obviously, those are non-starters. You have to communicate about those. Got to
Right.
do it, right? So whenever like forms come in from school and the kids are with me, I'll take a picture or a scan of those forms. I'll say, hey, this form has come. I filled it out, blah, blah, blah. All
Mhm.
is good, right? Those type of things, right? So you got to choose what you're going to communicate about. And then number two is you got to choose, and you have to decide how you are going to communicate.
Mm,
And how you communicate sometimes is just as important as what you're communicating about.
that's
Like if
true.
you go in it knowing that there's going to be a battle and you're like, well, you know what? I'm just telling you this because I have to and blah, blah, blah. Right? You know what's going to come out of that. You just know. Right. And don't get me wrong, it can be hard not to, especially if you start out nice and then it gets escalated and then so you escalate and then they escalate and then you escalate and before you know it, kaboom,
Right.
right? It's a thing, right?
Yeah,
So,
I like what you're saying in terms of the what and the how. And I think with how, it also is, it could be like, I guess maybe the way in which you deliver the message, so it could
mhm,
be your tone, but then also literally how. Maybe it's not good for us to get on the phone, but these
mhm,
days there's so many forms of communication, right? You mentioned like sending an email, or maybe we have a text chain. And if we need a third party in the text chain to help keep the peace, right? Like it's up to you and that co-parent to figure out your how.
mhm. In the beginning, I actually used to CC my lawyer on
Mhm.
virtually every email. And
Okay.
the reason I did that was because he was there to keep me honest and also there to keep me kind of, I guess, put a financial cognizance on how many times I was going back and forth. Because I
Mm,
knew every time he looked at an email, he was charging me for it.
that's a good point.
And that made me think, okay, I know that if I'm going to communicate, I'm probably going to CC my lawyer on this.
Mhm.
Do I need to write this email? Right? Because I know it's going to cost me 30, 40 bucks right off the
Right.
top just for him to look at it. And did that always work? No, right? But it was kind of one of those safety gates, right? To
Yes.
say, okay, and I to be perfectly fair, I had a very good lawyer as well, right? And he was the type of person who would email me back or even get me on the phone and say, do you know what, boy, you should, that email did not need to go out, right? Or
Mhm,
you didn't
mhm.
need to say it in such a way, you've kind of served to inflame or not. And I mean, I'm fortunate because I had my lawyer right through from 2018 right up until now. I've had the same lawyer, right?
Okay, so very
So
familiar with not just the situation, but also like both of your personalities, and they've gotten to know you both.
exactly,
Mhm,
right? And I definitely take that as a big bonus,
mhm,
and a big help. So that's where I started. At one point in time, there was a program that I tried that, in fact, we were required to use for a while. It was called Our Family Wizard.
mm.
I should have put that in the thing, but I'll find the link for it. But it's
Yeah, you
called Our
can.
Family Wizard, and what it is it's so you put, yourself, your ex, and anybody else who needs to communicate. Lawyers can get in there and see it, and it's like a form, right?
Mhm,
But for the family, right? For the co-parenting family. So when you write a message, right? It's got its topic and whatever not. It shows when it was sent, who it was sent to,
mm.
and it shows when it was read.
Okay.
Right? It shows when it was read, and then from when it was read, when it was replied to, who replied to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I found it to be a great actually program because it gave me the proof, and this isn't to toot my own horn or to whatever not, but I
Mhm,
tend to be the person who did more of the communication to this day,
mhm,
right? I do most of the communication, right? I push out, I push out, I push out, and I tend to get ignored, and whatever. It is what it is, right? I still have to
mhm.
do what I still have to do,
Right.
regardless of she doing what she's going to do doesn't negate my responsibility, right?
Yes. Yes.
But I kind of actually miss those days of having a provable I sent message at 3:43. That message wasn't read till 2 days later at 5:14, right?
Mhm,
That wasn't replied to until the next day at 3:22, right? And you have that, and you can say, so that when the inevitable, and I get this all the time now, is
mhm.
I didn't read it, or sorry, I forgot to respond, or whatever not. You actually have that provable to say, no, you didn't, right? Let's look at it. Unfortunately, that is a program that costs.
Okay.
So you also have to have the buy-in of both sides to pay for that, which is why we
True.
don't use it anymore. But bringing that back full circle, I'm doing the
Mhm.
weave.
It's fine. Yes.
I'm sorry, too soon for that.
No, no, it's fine. You're still on topic. I will let you know when you've gone too far left or right.
But anyway, so um, bringing that back to my point on how I communicate. So I try to
Mhm.
communicate, you know, during business hours. So
Okay.
I don't send emails too late or too early,
Mhm.
right? I try to communicate in more of a business-like way.
Okay.
So no, hey, how are you? La 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 la. And this is my situation, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, this is a situation that is quite high conflict. So typically the niceties get misinterpreted as
Oh, maybe
sarcastic.
sarcasm. Yes. Okay.
Exactly. So I tend
Mhm.
to try and keep it fairly fairly business-like, fairly business structured. So, good afternoon, so and so. This is to inform you of blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Here's the information. Thank you. That's it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. And you're actually kind of feeding into my next question. So I'll just share a little bit about myself. So I am a product of
Hmm.
co-parents.
Hmm.
My parents, they started off as best friends, and they're still good friends, in my opinion, today, just watching them interact. But they used to hang out on the block. I'm from a small town in North Carolina. It's called Burlington. And we had this
Hmm.
really long street. And so all the cool guys would go on the street. And my dad was a part of the Trans Am Club And so that was the car that he had. And I think he's had multiple of them like throughout that time. But him and his friends, they would all park on the block. And so, of course, the girls come through, and my parents like kept seeing each other in these spaces, right? Hanging out on the block. Oh, look how he looks, right? Then my aunt, she was married to a DJ. So, of course, my dad's going to the parties. My mom's at the parties. They met each other, right? Fall in love, get married, have me, la-di-da. My dad wanted to continue partying, and my mom was like, no, I'm going to settle down and take care of my kid. And so they divorced, but they still, remained on good speaking terms because they had started off as friends, and they still kind of traveled in some of the same circles, right? So when it comes to the lines of communication, I'm of the impression that they've kept the lines pretty open because my dad's been in the loop on what's happening with me, and so I'm depending on my mom, right, to keep my dad in the loop. But one thing that I have learned over the years is that I'm just going to say my dad, because my mom doesn't mention too much, but my dad has not always respected my mom's boundaries. And so talking about, what you were saying, you keep the communication more businesslike, like a little bit more formal or cordial. You have a clear line in terms of this is what we're going to talk about, the status of the kids. But how do you, I don't know how else to say this, but like make the other parent respect the boundaries? Because I've been at my dad's house and my dad is like, I heard your mom's dating. Sir, that is none of your business.
And it's a tough one because number one, I know that when you're in a relationship, you invest into that relationship. And when that breaks, you're like, I want to know what that other person's life is like. Right? I want to know that, basically I want to know that she's doing less good than she is now than she was with me. That's what I want to know. Right? That's what it is, right? It is. Nobody gets out of a relationship thinking, I just want to make sure that they're doing better now than they were with me.
True.
Right?
We're human. So
and we're human, right? So I guess, a number of things, and maybe this has less to do with communication than how you deal with the kids. Because you're not going to send an email saying, hey, former bae, how you doing? Heard you got a guy on the side now. I hope he's treating you good.
Some people might.
Look, if that's where you're at in your life and your relationship, then we have to have a different chat.
Okay.
We have to have a different chat. But I find what happens more than that is actually the sly, oh, you just came home. How's your dad doing? Oh, he did this, or you did that and that. Right. And this is a thing I have found, especially with young kids. Young kids do not keep secrets.
No.
Okay. Don't ask them to. Don't expect it. They don't. It's not going to happen. So I have very much lived my life, especially since the breakup, in such a way that my kids can go home and they can talk to their other house, and they can talk about whatever happened here. Okay. I'm not ashamed of anything that has happened here. I am not reticent that anything gets shared here. I live my life in that type of way. And that kind of takes that out, right? If their mom wants to know whatever happened in my house, whatever. Yeah. Right? And to be perfectly honest, that probably says more about her than it does about whatever happening in my house. That's true. Right? If we have a bad week, so what? Everybody has a bad week, right? If we don't go on an MNTV trip this week and do our thing, so what? Right? Haven't in a couple of weeks, right? But that has nothing to do with anything. So, to circle it back to communication, that probably like that whole trying to find out and get those little pieces of information and stuff like that, I find they tend to happen more through the children than it does, through the, sly communications or whatever not. And I have to communicate a lot. Like, for instance, a year and a bit ago when I wanted to go to Ghana, I had to tell her well in advance, I plan on going to another country with the children. Yeah. Right. Now she knows what my life's going to be like over the next little bit. And did I end up having to go to court? Oh, sorry. Oh, see, no. I have a dog down here too.
Dog there too.
And what he does is he lays on the wheels of my chair. Like, that's his favorite part. So if I move, he's like, ouch, you moved and hit me. I'm like, well, you're the dummy lying on my chair. So he's underneath there and he's given me puppy dog eyes, like, how could you do this to me?
How dare
And
you?
it's all because of where he decided to lay down and have a snooze. Anyway,
That's too funny. But yeah,
anyway,
thank you for sharing that. And also, yeah, like, yes, sometimes when it comes to setting boundaries, the kids can get caught up in the mix. I will
exactly.
say that if there is anyone out there where the significant other, maybe the boundaries is, let's not talk about this, don't talk about that. I've heard my mom just shut my dad down.
Mm, yep.
She's just been able to shut him down politely, and he lets it go. So again, it will depend on what type of I'm going to say relationship. I was about to say
Yeah.
connection, but no, like what type of rapport. That's a better word. What type of
Hmm.
rapport do you have as co-parents? And then from
Yes.
there, like you were saying earlier, you kind of gauge, okay, how am I going to address this in such a way that we don't get the kaboom, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
here's where I'm missing Curtis right now because I
Ah,
actually know that he has a better kind of co-parenting relationship with his ex,
mhm.
vis-a-vis his older son than I do with mine. And I'm sure he probably has, some great, some better insights and such like that on that type of thing. But, from my very much still in the trenches point of view, right,
Mhm.
is where that comes from. And I mean, as far as boundaries, like I tend to give my ex a very wide berth, right?
Okay.
Like like super, so I guess sometimes those boundaries don't come as much of a thing because I'm intentionally trying to stay away from
Ah,
anything that's going to cause a bit of extra conflict. Now that's me, right?
right.
I'm a classic conflict avoider. I do not like conflicts at all, right?
Yeah.
Always have been, right? And probably always will be. And that's just who I am. So I tend to try and avoid those things just by my nature. Whereas I know, there's some people who don't mind going there. So
Right. Yes.
what you doing this weekend? Well, none of your business, right?
Right. None of your business. Sorry, now the dog's at the door. Okay, I'm gonna ignore her. Okay, so I'm gonna weave. I want to weave in a little bit of current events, but I don't want to make an assumption. So as I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
I'm from North Carolina, so I live in the U.S. and of course,
Hmm.
Mike, you're in Canada. Now
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure you are familiar with Halle Bailey, right? The young lady who
Yes.
played Little Mermaid. Okay, are you
Yes. Yes.
familiar
Yes.
with her significant other who goes by the name of DDG?
No.
Okay,
No, I'm not. But
here's a little
dish the tea
backstory.
here. Let's get it.
Let's get it. Okay. So Halle Bailey and DDG, they ended up in a relationship. And DDG, he's a YouTuber slash rapper.
Okay.
They got together in their relationship around the time of Little Mermaid. He was very disrespectful, in my opinion, because he would
Hmm.
make these songs that came across as if he was being very negative about her career and her stardom and just disrespectful. He may have just said, "Oh, it's just my art and expression," but it just
Mm,
wasn't a good look considering they were together. Well, they
yeah.
got pregnant and they had a son
Hmm.
together. Their son's
Okay.
name is Halo. And
Halo.
yes. So I think Halo will be one like next month.
Hmm.
So anyway, new baby, and they just broke up last month.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
So right, so we
Hmm.
have this relationship now where new baby, now new breakup, and so they're very new to the world of co-parenting. Okay,
Hmm.
that's the backstory. So in
Okay.
recent news, there was a bit of a fuss because DDG had their son Halo on this popular live stream show that's pretty much watched by millions. I mean, the show that they were on, this kid is very famous. I say kid just because he's younger than me,
Yeah.
but he's very famous. He's well known, and so I didn't watch the show. Some of the clips that I saw, the kid was actually giving them gifts for their baby, like some diapers and like some other things. And so it may have been harmless, but either way, DDG did not have Hallie's permission to take the
Mm,
baby on the show. And so Hallie
hmm.
decided to vent her disapproval on social media.
Ah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, she later, in so many words, walked the statement back. But again,
Hmm.
it's clear that they're still new navigating the world of co parenting. So now that you have
Hmm.
been faced with this information, my question to you is if Hallie and DDG reached out to you for advice, what would
Hmm.
you say is the most essential part of maintaining good communication as co parents?
Sure. So I would start by saying, I mean, this is the thing. There is no breakup, especially when a kid is in in the midst of it, that's just all rainbows and unicorns, right?
Mm.
There are hurt feelings, right? There are hearts involved, and that's just that. And both sides have to understand that there is a heart on the other side,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like on the other side of, on my ex's side, there's a heart. On my side, there's a heart, right? And you have two choices, right? You can choose to do things that you know are going to be for the betterment of your child and for the other person in this relationship, or you can choose not to,
Right.
right? And if you're going to choose not to, you are going to be in the wrong always. It's just
Yeah.
that simple, right?
Right.
And I mean, my father always tells me that, I punch too hard, right? When I'm giving advice,
Mm.
right? I'm supposed to use softer gloves, but
Okay.
sometimes there's just no good way to say it. Like, don't be a jerk, right? Just
Okay. Yeah.
that, like that simple. Don't be a jerk. If you are about to do something and you know or you suspect that your ex probably isn't going to like it. And I'm not saying this applies to everything.
Right.
Like, I push my kids hard on school. I know my ex doesn't. Whatever, right? I'm still going to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still going to push. And when my kids go and complain to their mother about daddy being all mean on school, I'll take that, right?
Yeah.
Big shoulders, no problem. But when it comes to, certain things, or like for travel, right? I know specifically that she doesn't like it when I travel with them because I'm guessing it's because maybe she thinks it makes her look bad because she
Hmm.
doesn't or isn't able to. But
Okay.
whatever, I'm able to take that. But when it comes to things like this, where you're taking a child that is a baby and putting them on the internet and stuff like that, if you know specifically, hey, the other person is probably not going to like this, especially if a child like my kids, they have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? I ask them specifically, are you okay with us doing this? And it was their idea in the first place that we should do the YouTube channel. So I
Mm-hmm.
know that this is something that they are okay with. And when they stop being okay with it, I'm okay with stopping,
Right.
right? I
Right.
don't bring them up by name in this. I know I put a picture up there and it's right in my back. That's brand new, but
Yeah.
but I don't typically put them, name them or anything like that in this channel because this channel was not their choice.
Yes.
This
Right.
channel was my choice. So I'm not forcing them into this, but especially a baby, right? It's a young child, 1, 2, 3 years old. They don't have a choice in what they do. When they're with the parent, they are just along for the ride, right? And you
Right.
have to be cognizant of that too, and not just for communication between the parent. Because I mean, this is the thing: you do something like that, and the other parent's going to get steamed, and then they're going to say something, and you're going to say something back, and boom,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the thing you have to think about as well is you have a child. And yes, that child is not going to say anything to you about this today. But what are they going to think about it in 5 years or 10 years when they're old enough to see this or when they're an adult?
Right.
All right. What is that child going to think of you and your parenting style and your communication and how you dealt with their other parent whom they love?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I
Yes.
mean, I know that as a parent, right, it crushes my soul, not really, that they love their mother. No, I expect it. I expect that they love their mother just as
Right.
much as they love me. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
there's this tacit, untold battle for the children's affection, but it's not, right? The children
Mm-hmm.
are not in a battle to see who they're going to love more. They love their
Mm-hmm.
parents equally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you specifically do something to betray that trust.
That's true. Right.
And the things that you typically are going to end up doing that betray your children's trust is stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the stuff you do to hurt the other person that your children will look back on and say, why? Why did you do that?
Right.
Right? I mean, my parents are divorced, and there are things that I look back on both sides and I say, why'd you have to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You may have thought that it was proving your point or doing this or doing whatever, right? I look back at it as the child and I think, you done dirty.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And so you have to and maybe this is the big point about communication, which is exactly right on time. Right 30 minutes into this thing, you get the big point on communication, right? I did not plan this, but
No,
this
it's
works
working
out for
perfectly.
right. And this is it. When you are communicating, who are you thinking about? Are you thinking about you or are you thinking about your kids?
Mm.
right? Who are you thinking about? When you're about to write that email, are you thinking about what this email or what this phone call or what this text message, how this is going to be interpreted by your children? Because it will be, right? And this is the thing, not every single little thing is going to be parsed by your children. Children don't do that.
Right.
However, on the grand scale of things, when you send an email and suddenly mommy's in a bad mood, oh, why are you in a bad mood, mommy? Oh, daddy went and sent this email and said this. That sticks in their brain. Oh, daddy put mommy in a bad mood. Mommy put daddy in a bad mood. They said this. And you know what? As parents, I mean, we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to tell the other children, oh, daddy said this or mommy said
Right.
that. But you know what? It happens. It
Mm-hmm.
happens. And not only like it will happen on purpose, like people straight out do this on purpose.
Right.
Your mom said this to me, I didn't like it, which is horrible. And if you're listening to me, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, don't do that to you. Especially the younger your kid is, the less you should be doing that. Like I have a 17-year-old and we have some more frank conversations on those, but it's usually with information that he brings to me, not information that I bring to him.
Mm-hmm. I like that dynamic. And you're right. The younger you are, the younger your child is, the more you really should refrain, because people just don't understand that, even in passing, right? So maybe you haven't directly said something to your child, but maybe when you hung up the phone, you had a few choice words. And so now they still interpret, they still understand and know. And that becomes very burdensome to the child, right? And
Yep.
we've, maybe even seen instances of kids that were acting out in school, and it's because they're trying to navigate these big emotions.
Yep.
And there's already the one big emotion of, I have to now go between two homes. But then if you're going to one home and you're hearing negativity, and you go to the other home and you're hearing negativity, now there's the confusion. It just becomes entirely too much for the kids,
And that makes life very difficult. And more than that too. And I mean, this is something like, for instance, this stream, I typically do on weeks when my kids aren't here.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I do that is for the same reason why when I communicate, I actually tend to communicate more when the kids aren't around or after like they've gone to bed or stuff like that, so that they don't hear the aftermath of these conversations as well.
Right.
Because what happens? Your ex says something to you, it gets you all hot, and either you rattle off or you get into a phone argument, or worse yet, because most people, when they're talking to their ex or whatever, they'll find ways to make sure the kid's not around, but kids listen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Your house is not soundproof.
No.
Right? They'll hear, they'll see your bad mood. But more than that, the part that people are less careful about is how they talk to their friends and family about their ex.
That is a good point. Yes.
So oftentimes they'll get back on the phone with their mom or their dad or their best friend or whatever. Do you know what Tyrone just said to me? You would not believe, right? And their kids hearing that.
Yeah.
Right. And kids are smart. They can put 2 and 2 together.
They can.
Right. Even if you don't use the person's name. Right. A kid is smart enough, even at 3-4 years old, to say, mommy had a conversation with daddy. Mommy's in a bad mood. Mommy's talking to this person. Mommy must be talking about daddy. Right.
Yeah.
That's mental math a child can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They may not be doing it consciously, but subconsciously they know. Right. Kids are very, very smart that way. So you have to be careful about kind of the outflows of the communication that you're doing as well, to make sure that those are also not affecting your child. And the onus is, again, it's on both parents, right? I have to be careful that my communication is not causing them to have a worse time in their other home than they otherwise would have been.
Right.
And that's a hard one for me, because especially coming from a place where I know that my home is, at least to me, a better home than the home that they are in, right? There's a part of my subconscious that really wants them to want my home more. But I have to be careful as the parent, as the adult, as the mature one, to not do things to sabotage the relationship surreptitiously.
That's right. Right. You'll hear sometimes where family members may give the advice of you just do the best that you can do and what's good for your child. And as the children get older, they will start to make their own decisions, and
Yep,
they'll come into their
exactly.
own understanding. You don't need to influence that, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly the thing is do what's right.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like play the long game, right? If you want to put this in win or lose and whatever not, which
Yeah.
nobody wins and nobody loses in this stuff. There is no winners. But if you want to put it in those terms, right, in the sports term or whatever not, you got to play the
Hmm.
long game,
Play
right?
the long game.
You need to do what you know is right, knowing that your kids or whoever else might not see that today,
Right.
but they might see it tomorrow, and they definitely will see it in the years to come. And once they become adults, they'll be able to look back, right? And kids are smart. Like I look back now, I'm, 40 plus years old, and I
Hmm.
look back and I see the things that my parents did with a clarity that I obviously could not when I was in my teenage years and younger.
Hmm.
Right. And now that I look back with a different lens and with a lens of having my own kids, and I can look back and say, whoa, hold on a second. There are things that my mother did that I'm like, now that I'm looking back on it and seeing
Hmm.
the similarities, I have problems with,
Hmm. But that's
right?
a
I have
conclusion that you came to on your own, right? It wasn't
exactly,
necessarily forced on you or influenced, by your dad or some other family member. It's like,
ex-
as we get older, we reflect, and then we can kind of make a decision, right, on how we want to navigate that. Like,
exactly.
it, to your same point, I've looked at some things that my mom has done, some things that my dad has done. I'm like, I really wish they hadn't done it that way.
Mhm.
But now I know that if I were ever, well, I don't have kids, but if I did have kids, I would kind of use that as like a little litmus test, like a little barometer, right? Like, I wouldn't want to wade into that territory because I know how it has affected me as an adult.
Yeah, exactly. So like when I'm taking about like think about what I'm doing. And I know it's hard, right? When you're in the heat of the moment with somebody who has broken your heart,
Yeah.
it is hard to think, is what I am doing now going to affect somebody else in the future?
Right.
But that's what
Right.
you got to do, right?
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. Wow, I need
That's
to
your
put
North
that in the
Star,
book.
right? You always have to think about that.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's exactly it. And especially because the people that you're talking about are little people. They are children, right? And what you do today will affect them in the future, whether good or bad. Every action that you make
Hmm.
has a little bit of a moderating influence on their trajectory in life,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Every good word, every compliment, every piece of discipline that you do for your children has that. And everything that you do that they see you do. So if they see you do something negative to somebody else, especially somebody who they love, right, in
Right.
that other parent, right, and they do love them,
Yes.
right, because that's how children are designed. We are designed to love our parents, right?
Hmm.
Our parents have to do incredibly awful, horrible things for us to turn off that love pipe, right?
Right.
I mean,
That's
there
true.
are parents who have done, who abuse their children and who have done awful, awful things, and their children are still the ones saying, "I love my mom, I love my dad," and you think,
Right.
how,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But put that in your head as that is how bad it has to be for a child to not love their parents. So no matter what you think of the other person who has left you or you left or whatever not, your
Hmm.
children love that other person and they
Hmm.
don't want to see that other person hurt. Right. Now, that's not to say you can't be honest with your children if they bring to you something of concern or
Okay.
something like that. That's not to say you can't be honest with your children. That's to say, kind of what do the Muslims say? Do no harm. Or no, doctors. There we go. Say do
Doctors.
no
Yeah.
harm.
Yeah. It's
Right.
part of the
Do
Hippocratic Oath, I think.
right. Exactly. Right. Do no harm. Right.
Hmm.
And that's not to say that, hey, sometimes you don't have to do some radical surgery, but you
Hmm.
do that with in mind that I'm going to do the best that I can here. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to harm somebody intentionally, even though that person may have harmed me.
Hmm.
Right. And trust me, it is not easy. Right. It is not easy for me to sit here on a stream and say that
Yeah.
because there are many days where I'm like, ah, if only I could just fill in the
Hmm.
blank. Right. And it would just give me no end to the joy to be able to do blah, 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 right? Or to say something super negative or do something super negative. But at the end of the day, I have to think, my kids are going to see it.
Right.
They're going to find out about it, right? I do this, and their mother is likely to say, oh, your dad did this or said that or whatever not. And the kids are going to have to parse that and
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, why did my dad do that thing that made my mom feel bad?
Yeah.
Right. And same thing on this end, right? I mean, I have had instances, like for instance, when it comes to travel, right? I was supposed to go to the United States last summer,
Mm-hmm.
and their mother, through surreptitious ways, I guess, through delay taxes and stuff like that, stopped that from happening. Right.
Okay.
And they came to me and their question was, why would mommy do this?
Okay. So this is a great example of there was a situation where you as co-parents, you disagreed. So how did you communicate and like share this with your kids without hopefully ruining them for the future?
Well, do you know what? I literally, like, when they came to me and they said, why would mommy do this? I just said, you know what? I don't know. Right. And that's the honest truth. And
Mm.
sometimes the easiest way is just to be honest.
Okay, yeah.
And like, I'm like, when I say do no harm, that doesn't mean I also have to defend her if she has done something that I think is wrong. But
Mhm,
how I go and say that, like, I don't have to go to my kids and say, your mom did this. I think it was horrible of her. Your mom is a very bad person.
mhm, right.
But I
Yeah.
can say, do you know what, kids? I don't know why, your mom would say that. This is what I tried. And I try to be very honest with my children as much as is age appropriate. So for instance, if I send an email to my ex about something that the kids have asked, like they want to spend an extra day with me,
Mhm.
right? And then they don't get an answer back. And sometimes I say, well, did you? And I'll show them the email. I'll say, here it is. You can
Mm.
take my phone. Or if their mom says, well, I sent an email and he didn't get it, sometimes I'll just give them my phone. I'll say, you know where my mail app is. Go look.
Mhm.
Right. Before I can even delete the email or whatever other spooky thing I might do to try and get your here, take a look. If you see the email, I will eat crow. Right.
Mm.
So, and because my kids know that I will do that, it actually makes it a little bit easier because my kids then have a bit more of an assumption on the fact that I'm just going to be honest with them.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I say, no, I did not receive this email, or no, I did not get this answer, or whatever not, they're actually a little bit more likely to believe it without me having to go to that length because they
Gotcha. So
know,
that's not something you would do all the time. It's
oh, no, I
just
don't. No, and again, back to choosing your battles,
okay.
right? But
Yes.
but many times, right? Like for instance, my daughter, she'll ask, can I spend an extra day? And I'll send the mother a text message and say, can't you spend an extra day?
Mhm.
And oftentimes she'll just ignore it until it's too late,
Mhm.
right? And then my daughter will say, well, did my mom email back? Did she email back? And I'll say, no,
Oh,
here's my
gotcha.
phone. Take a look.
Yeah.
Right? You can see that she didn't because I know that when she goes back to her mother's house, she's going to say, why didn't you respond? And her mother's going to say, well, I did send your dad an email. So at least I know she has the tools to say, no, I checked my dad's email myself. And for the record, just by the way,
Mhm.
I should put this out there. I
Mhm.
have a separate email address that is only for communication with my ex. I
Okay,
don't
that's
use it
another
for
tip then. Yeah.
yeah, I don't use it for everything else. So it's not like she's going in there and seeing my bank statements and my emails with my mistress. I don't have
All the
a
coupon deals you got going on.
mistress. Exactly. Right. She's not seeing that. It's an email address I use only for that. And actually, not only is that a good thing for just keeping things kind of separate, but it's
Mhm.
also a good thing for making sure that you can't be trapped in this. Oh, I sent you the email to your other email address. Didn't you get it
Oh,
there? Right? There is
gotcha.
only one email and it is separate from everything else. So there's no,
Mhm.
it got stuck in the junk mail or it didn't go or anything like that.
Yeah.
If it's in this inbox, it is from that person. That's it.
Yeah,
That's the
just
only person that sends emails to this email address. That's it. And I mean, in
right.
this day of Gmail and all that kind of stuff, there's no practical reason to not have a completely separate email address and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just another way to keep the lines of communication open, right? If it's all going into one inbox, right, or
Mhm.
one application, like I think you dropped a link in the chat, if it's all going into our family wizard or whatever line of communication you choose, it you can't say that, oh, I missed it, right? Because there was
Mhm.
something else in there that distracted me. It's just when when you get a notification, then you know that that's just the
Yeah.
communication that you have between the two of you. That's
Yeah.
great. I
And
like that.
frankly, and frankly, especially when I was deep into like in when we were into what I call lawyer land and court land, right? When
Mhm.
there was emails flying all the time, because the nature of the work that I do and the jobs that I do and all that are very email heavy. So anytime I saw an email pop up, because when it was all together, right, in one thing, right, I would get anxiety every time an email came in, regardless if it was from her, from my lawyer, or what. Every email that came in would cause me anxiety.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
then not only that, like during my workday, I'd be like, oh, I need to check this because, I don't know if it's going to be from there. So having my email separate actually helped me reduce my own anxiety because
Nice.
I knew if I hear it from this app, okay, that's a safe email, no
Yeah.
problem. If I hear it from this one, okay, that's one of those emails, right? But at least it reduced the amount of anxiety because it's not every email notification now that's coming in that's causing me to go, right?
Mhm.
It's only the ones from here.
Yeah, that's very smart. It's allowing you to protect your peace. It's
Mm-hmm.
also allowing you to um, handle that interaction when you are prepared and ready. You know, like you're saying, if it's coming in the midst of like a high stress work day or something like that, then it can throw you off your game, right? And dare I say, ruin the rest of your day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you know that, okay, at the end of the day is when I will check it, or you know what, I have an extra long lunch because I don't have a meeting right after my lunchtime. I'm mentally
Exactly.
prepared and ready to go in there. And if it isn't anything negative, great, pleasantly surprised. But if
Mm,
it is something that you have to address, you're in a better mental state to be able to handle
you
it.
got it.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
I like that. Earlier you mentioned briefly about parenting styles. You said
Mhm.
education. I love that, right? It's important, top of the list, right? For the kids.
Absolutely.
And there's people out there that will give this well-intentioned advice where it's like, oh, if you're with your partner, make sure you have these conversations about kids before you have the kids, right? Like, do we both even want kids? How
Mhm.
many kids do you want? How many do I want? Are they
Mhm.
going to go to daycare? Are they going to stay at my mama's house? Or are you going to work from home? Right? Like, there's all these different questions
Yep.
that people say that we should ask. And maybe we have the conversation, maybe we don't. But regardless, once the kids are here, we have to do our best to be on the same page with raising them.
Mhm.
So, how have you handled disagreements in both your parenting styles, like while you're still trying to navigate the world of co-parenting?
Can I just be blunt and frank? We just
Yeah.
my kids live in two different worlds.
Okay.
When they
Okay.
when they are here, they are in a virtually completely different world than when they are over there. Like for
Hmm.
instance, over there, and I'm not saying anything that isn't public knowledge. My kids will tell you this, right? They're allowed to swear over there, right? They
Okay.
can say they've been told as long as you know what the word means, which I don't know what that means, they can say it,
Right.
right?
Use it in the right context and it's okay.
Yeah, that type of thing. To which, like over here, I'm like, nope, right?
Mm.
Absolutely, absolutely not, right? I
Hmm.
push harder on, school issues and attendance and things like that. I have a little bit more of a segment, or not segmented, but scheduled, existence. I push more on family relations and and such like that, even to the point
Yeah.
where I still have a relationship with her mother and grandmother, whereas she
Mm.
doesn't,
Okay.
right? So, it's a very different world for them here than it is over there,
Yeah.
right?
That's interesting though, that I'm sorry, now you got me weaving. So
Yeah,
you have open lines of communication with her some of her family more
I do.
so than she does.
Yeah.
So I'm sure this is a question that anyone watching the stream may want to ask, but like, have you ever taken advantage of those lines of communication to try to help with the co-parenting at all?
No, and the reason is because she has actually a very bad relationship with her own family.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I have a good line of relationship with them because I'm essentially the only way they can see the children.
Mm, I see.
So,
Okay.
I have taken them because I feel that family is important. And by the way, I'm going to put this in the chat
Mhm,
too. But we did talk about that, Curtis and I, in I think our second episode there. So I just put a link to that in the
mhm,
chat as well. But yeah, and so she has cut her family, especially her mother and her grandmother, out of her life completely, due to whatever circumstances she felt
mhm.
necessitated that. Again, go back to, did I give the right link? I hope I did. Anyway,
We'll
um,
put it in the description box when this comes
exactly, exactly.
out.
I think it was, yeah, the extended family maze was the episode. So if you guys go back and check the extended family maze, you can get our discussion on that a little bit to get
Mhm,
more of the context. But the long and short of the story is, her mother and her grandmother, the only way that they can see their grand and great grandkids is through me.
mhm.
So she doesn't communicate with them at all. So they're actually, in many ways, they're in the same position that I am in.
Gotcha.
Right. In
Okay.
fact, the grandmother did try and go to court at one point in time to get some time with the children,
Mhm.
and circuitously ended up, I just said, you know what, they're with me. When they're with me, you're open to see them, and you know what, that has also helped us to kind of reconcile our relationship because when my ex left, right, that relationship with her side of the whole family, right, obviously went down as well because they
Mhm.
started by supporting her, which I
Right.
get, right?
Yeah.
I get it, right? They were supporting their daughter under circumstances which they were not fully aware of, right? And
Mhm.
the sad part is now that they are more aware of that, it's kind of come back to now we talk and they don't, which is unfortunate, right? But the children need, they need family, right? They
Yeah.
have to, right? Their family doesn't go away on either side just because we don't like each other,
That is so
right?
true. And for anyone listening that maybe has tried that avenue, like I personally would caution against it. I know
Mhm,
growing up, there would be instances where my great grandparents now, and this is on my dad's side. So my great grandfather was a pastor. And so
mhm,
it was that weird dynamic where my dad would say some things to them and I'm just going to say feeding them information. And
mhm,
then when my mom and I would go over, and my mom still did a lot of stuff for them. She'd take my great grandmother to the grocery store, to yard sales, to things like that. She'd like give my great grandfather manicures. Like, so she was still very much connected in the family, even though
mhm,
my parents were divorced. But
mhm,
sometimes my great grandparents would bring up certain, topics of conversation, or they would kind of share some information. And my mom, she knew for a fact that like my dad had planted some sort of seed, right?
mhm.
Maybe using that as a way to try to convince her or to get his point across. And
Yeah,
I would say don't play those games
don't. Do
because
you
it
know?
goes
And the thing
back to
is,
in the end, the kids being the one that get caught in the middle of it.
exactly. And I think this is the thing. Anything that you are going to try to do to get to the other person is going to it's it's going to backfire on you
Mm,
because all that happens in those crossfires is the kids get caught in the crossfires,
that's it.
right? The kids get into this whole, well, grandpa said this about my mom, or grandma said this about my dad, or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Whatever was said about whom, when, where, and how, it's going to happen. And so just don't, right?
Yeah.
Don't
Just don't.
try to get to the other person via via somebody else, via any, whether it be a friend or another family member or whatever not.
Yes.
Just don't do it.
Just don't
Just
do it,
don't do
right?
it.
Find a
Yeah,
way to establish your own open line of communication, right? Figure out what's
exactly.
the best way for us to communicate. We'll keep it cordial, we'll keep it respectful. Obviously, we'll keep the
Exactly.
kids top of mind, right? In all of our communication, because that's the only reason why we're still talking anyway. It's for these kids. So
Exactly. That's 100%. That's 100% it. Speaking of kids, it's the changing of the guards here. My kids are just showing up in the house. But that's okay. We can keep talking. They knew I was going to be on a stream when they came in. My dog's just
gotcha.
super 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 happy to see my daughter. So he's wagging his tail and jumping up and all that kind of stuff, which is nice. Makes me happy
Yes.
when my kids come home.
Yay. I can see it all in your face. You're like, my baby's in here. Hercules. I love it. I love it. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour anyway, and these
Oh,
were like the
perfect.
these are the burning questions that I had. So, is there any final thoughts? We were hoping that Curtis could chime in and join us, but I know he had other
Yeah,
things going on today. So I'll just turn it over to you,
life
Mike.
life be happening, which
Life be
is
happening.
fine. So Curtis, we miss you.
Yes.
We'll see you in a month. You'll be back. We'll have you back as well. This has been great. You've been an absolutely fantastic moderator as well, and I think it's been great. It's fun with me and Curtis because we have that dad on dad type of thing. But
Mhm.
having somebody to kind of have that kind of overview effect has been actually really great as well. So I really do appreciate that. So we'll definitely have to find a way to have you come back for sure. But you know what? Since we're at the top of the hour, let's give you a little bit of time. What have you got going on in your land, right? I mean, you've got your own YouTube channel. This is, like we mentioned, there's lots of things that you do and such like that. So I've put your link up for people to check out on YouTube and stuff like that. But what have you got going on and coming up?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for again allowing me to be here. This is great. So as we've said, by trade, I'm an MC and event host. And so having this opportunity to be on here with you, it just helps me keep my skills sharp, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes I will moderate a panel, virtual or in person. And so having some questions already set up, but being able to just go with the flow in the conversation, like I've really enjoyed this. Definitely put it on my resume.
Awesome.
Definitely, yes. So these days from the event side, I've been doing a lot of work with a new auction company that I've
Okay.
signed with. They're called Kill Breath Events. And so
Okay.
we've been doing a lot of fundraising events, so nonprofit gala. So it's been me as the MC alongside an auctioneer.
Okay.
And
I was
that,
kind of hoping that you were going to say that you were the auctioneer because I would love
listen,
to see that.
they want to send me to training so bad because what I've learned is pretty much everyone, not everyone, but quite a few people got their start with the company as MCs. And
Hmm.
since then, they've gone on to do training and become auctioneers. And so
Oh,
now
very
they're dual
cool.
hat, right? They can do both.
Hmm.
My issue is I cannot hold numbers in my head. And so
Hmm.
that's my challenge. I can absolutely run around in the crowd and randomly point out people and, kind of get beside someone and convince them to
Hmm.
potentially bid some more for an item. But I would be that person that'd be like, how much did you say again? Now, how much did you say? I'm like, are we doing $25 increment or $50? Where are we? So I don't know how to fix that. So for now, I'm like, I am fine from the sideline. I would just be the MC. So that's been really fun. So closing out the year with a couple of events there. And
Yeah.
then as far as my channel is concerned, for anyone that wants to come check me out, I like to show behind the scenes for my career.
Yeah.
So when I am doing acting gigs, I try to, as long as nobody gets upset, I will film what's happening behind the scenes.
Hmm.
And then the same for when I MC events, I like to showcase that as well.
Yeah.
And then other thing is just lifestyle and travel. So I mentioned that I'm a pet sitter and I also house sit. So I
Yep.
bring folks along so they can see these fur babies that I hang out with. And then when I can, I will post a bit about my travel. So just came back from Denver
Very
um,
cool.
over the Halloween season. So I have some videos out there about that now.
Very, very cool. Very cool indeed. Well, I cannot wait to see everything. And this will not be the last stream that me and you do either,
We have another one
because
coming up. Tell them
we have
all
another
about it,
one.
Mike.
So on the other channel, on my other channel, on MNTV Family, we are going to be talking about travel, and we've done one before, and we were just talking about reminiscing about travel and just kind of setting the groundwork because we've both traveled a fair bit.
Mhm.
This one we're actually going to talk a little bit more specifically about kind of some of the do's and don'ts of traveling abroad, especially once you start getting beyond our North American borders.
Right.
Some things that you definitely want to think about not doing
Mhm.
or doing in a different way
Yep.
or thinking about before you go, so that not only do you just not get yourself in trouble. I mean, there are things that you can do out there that you wouldn't think about that would literally get you in trouble. Like we were talking about one man back in the 90s, and
Mhm.
he jaywalked,
Mhm.
right? He
The,
jaywalked
the
and he
the one story we were talking about particularly was an American, a US visitor to Singapore.
Yes.
And while he was there, he chose to do some spray painting, which
Oh,
why?
that was it. That was it. Right.
Right. First of all, why? But okay,
Yeah.
you decided to do it. And what he didn't realize was that his punishment was to be caned.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, you don't want to get yourself in that kind of trouble, right? So, and I mean that is, yes, that can be the far end of things happening.
Right.
But right, why take the risk? So we're gonna talk a bit about that, share some of our insights and such like that, and I think it's gonna be a
Mhm.
good time. Hopefully, coming up within a week or two here, we're gonna get that online. But check out my channel and Facebook and all those other places at MNTV Family, and you will see that pop up soon enough. I'm sure. Again, if you check out Alicia's channel
Mhm.
and her socials as well, you will see those pop up. And we're gonna keep
Yes.
it going, keep doing a lot of things, and just rolling and talking about the things that are important in life.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that puts us right exactly on 1 hour, which is
Look at
pretty
us.
perfect.
See, but we also need to let the people know that, like, I have a background in acting and like TV and stuff, but you do
Mhm.
too,
That
right?
that is true. It's my little secret.
Yeah.
But I haven't done any acting in a long time.
Mm,
But what I have found is that those skills have transferred into like doing this, for
yes,
instance,
that's
right?
right.
Those skills. I mean, I was a pastor for some time, so those acting skills
Mhm.
have definitely transferred into doing what I'm doing now. I think I mentioned, right, and I haven't been all big about it because it's not ready yet, but I am writing a book as
Yeah,
well. So I hope I get to the point where I'm doing some more talking about that. So all these
mhm.
skills that you gain through life, they transfer,
They
right?
transfer.
They get you from one place to another, and eventually you end up where you're doing a live stream with a professional MC across the country, and actually not even across the country, just across the mountains, really.
Right, we're just neighbors. Yeah, since I'm in Seattle area, so yeah, I mentioned where
Exactly.
I'm
So
from, but now I live in Seattle. So look,
yeah, so
just a couple
just across the
stones
mountains.
throws.
If you can throw your stones real high.
Awesome. This has
uh
been great, Mike. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of it.
Absolutely. And it was a really great time. I really appreciate you showing up and being here with me and chatting me through communication. And
Yeah.
I really hope we get to do this again. But
Yes.
for those who have been watching, I really appreciate you guys coming by and watching. And for those who are catching the replay, again, thanks a lot. Check out Alicia Nicole on her sites. You can check out. You can check out everything that I do on this channel. You can also check out my other channel at MNTV Family. And I hope that we will see you guys all again soon, but definitely on this live stream in 1 month's time, second Sunday of every month. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you guys all have a great evening.